Although I often make a video of leaving the Deben in the spring, I don't normally bother to make a video of sailing up the Deben to lift out, as everyone knows the river by the end of the season. However, 2017 was different. I was committed to lifting out on the 5th of October. A few days later, we were chartering in Greece, and the next window of suitable spring tides in October was already booked up. And in any case, my daughter was due to have her first child then. The next set of spring tides was in November, and by that time I had to be back out of the marina. However, when Hurricane Irma started to batter the Caribbean, I began to worry, because the tail end of hurricanes usually hits the UK a fortnight later. At first it looked as though Irma might be a problem, but she passed up the channel on the 1st and 2nd of October, and we scarcely noticed her passing in Suffolk. The previous week, the 5th was still predicted to be 10-10 sunshine and about 12 knots. Perfect. Then a new low began to develop, and by the Monday it was clear this could be a major problem. By Tuesday a yellow warning was out for strong winds with gusts to 60 knots on the night of the 4th and 5th. The centre was due to pass a little further north, and the worst of the wind was predicted to be over by the time I wanted to leave Woolverstone, but it would be a close run thing. The Deben bar is no place to be in strong winds. By Wednesday evening, the various Met sites were more or less agreed that the peak of the winds would be over by 7 a.m, and that the wind would shift from westerly to northwesterly about that time. If you must have strong winds, a northwesterly is a good direction to cross Deben bar, as there is only a short fetch, and you can expect it to be fairly smooth. Going up the Deben is a different matter. The bit that worried me most was whether the prop would be clean enough to push us against 30 to 40 knot gusts, and whether I would have enough control to follow the twisting channel between the marina and Larkman's boatyard. I planned to leave the Royal Harwich Marina at 7:45 and cross the Deben bar at 10 o'clock, 2 hours before local high water. When I arrived at the marina at 7 a.m, it looked as though the predictions were correct, and that the worst of the winds were over. They were all wrong by a couple of hours. The 20 to 25 northwesterly blowing down the Orwell when I arrived had changed to 30 to 35 knots by my planned departure time. That made it too dangerous to leave, with too much chance of losing control trying to back out and make a turn in a tight space. I was beginning to think I was going to have to abandon the attempt. That was not a good time. I had just heard my daughter had gone into labour early, and with all the stress, I had missed the start of the local 30-mile-an-hour speed limit and had just gone past a camera van. Then our luck changed. A clear patch came over, and at 8:15 the wind dropped to 25 knots, long enough for us to get out into the river. The lull didn't last long though. I just had time to get the fender stored and a storm jib rigged when a 45-knot squall came through.
Not nice.
The squall passed after 5 minutes or so, and after that we mostly had 25 to 35 knots going down the Orwell. We had to dodge the Stairline ferry twice, once coming out of the Stour and again out of the Orwell. Eventually we jibed before Lungar Point and crossed the channel inside the harbour. You're not supposed to do that, but if we hadn't, she would have forced us a long way out to sea, as we were essentially going at about the same speed. Once clear of the harbour, it was an easy sail in flat water up the coast, with the storm jib giving us a bit of extra push against the spring tide. In the 30 to 35 knot winds we were experiencing, a full blade jib would have been the better sail, but I was keen to see how the storm jib behaved. I took the jib down before we entered the Deben, as I knew it would only get wet if we left it on deck, and it would be of no use with the wind dead on the nose. our speed down the River Orwell and up the coast, we'd made up for the half-hour delay in starting and arrived at the bar exactly 2 hours before high water. I'd expected a minimum depth of 3.4 metres, and we recorded 3.5, just a beam Knoll spit. I was a bit concerned about the position of the Red Buoy off Felixstowe Ferry Sailing Club. It seemed much closer to the shore than I remembered, and we'd already seen one of the green buoys at Pin Mill, way off station, with the harbour master's launch trying to get it back in place. We crossed the river and gave it the sort of clearance we would always have done in the past. I had expected it to be rough on the fetch between the ferry and Ramsholt, and had changed over to my waterproof camera. What I hadn't expected was for it to get even worse on the fetch between the rocks and Waldringfield. Once amongst the moorings at Waldringfield, the wind and waves rapidly decreased. We found a least depth of 2.7 metres in Loder's Cut, which was a good bit more than I was expecting, and we began to suspect some sort of surge was taking place. Matthew had a look at his phone at the Harwich Harbour site, and indeed a fairly significant surge was underway.
Yeah. Yeah, I reckon that's 2.1. Which means it's high. It's 20 minutes ahead of it.
The stretch from the marina to Larkman's that I had been worried about was a complete doddle, and we slowed right down as we were following two other boats. They had only come from Waldingfield and couldn't understand why we were in full oilskins. The prompt wasn't pretty, but for the first time ever it had no barnacles, which explained why we were still able to get 5 knots boat speed into headwinds of 30 to 35 knots. The surge had turned a 3.9 metre tide into a 4.9 metre tide. It got so deep you couldn't walk along the slope of the seawall at Larkman's pontoon, and when we got back to Woolverstone the road under the Orwell Bridge had obviously been badly flooded. It was still blowing old boots at the club, much harder than at Woodbridge. Just to add to the complications of this year's lift out, when I got back from Greece and set off to get the boat sorted out, I found someone had been hit in their car on the level crossing into Larkman's. The road was closed and the air ambulance was in attendance evacuating the casualty.